My name's Mark Collins. While I was working on my master's in chemistry during grad school, I met Rachel. It was one of those moments where I just knew. I fell for her instantly. It took her about 6 months to feel the same way, just before she finished her MA in art history. But eventually she did. Neither of us had much experience in relationships, but as far as I was concerned, our physical connection was great. She never had any complaints, at least none that she shared. Less than a year after she graduated, we tied the knot. We both landed jobs in the same city. She started teaching at a community college, and I split my time between a part-time gig at a state university and consulting work in the sciences. After 3 years of marriage, I left the university job and went full-time into consulting, specializing in explosives. One of my major clients was the federal government. Around the time our first daughter, Megan, was born, I was traveling a lot for work. I know it was hard on Rachel, but I offered to switch to a full-time teaching position at a nearby college. They'd been trying to recruit me for a while. Still, Rachel valued the income and the lifestyle my consulting work provided. She'd smile and say, "I'll manage, I'm independent." Even after our second daughter, Claire, came along 2 years after Megan, my travel schedule didn't slow down. I brought up changing careers again, but Rachel told me to keep doing what I was doing, especially now that we had 2 little ones to care for. Things changed a bit when the girls were 5 and 7. My work travel eased up, and Rachel decided to get back into the workforce. She landed an administrative position at the local university, mostly tied to the liberal arts department. I never really understood why that role appealed to her so much, but it made her happy, and that was enough for me. Around that time, Rachel also developed a big interest in photography. We've got over a dozen photo albums filled with memories of the kids and our family life. Later, she also became interested in languages, especially Italian. Occasionally, she'd travel for work, often heading to Chicago for meetings with donors, guest lecturers, and visits to the Art Institute. She'd also catch up with her old college friend Julia, who had been an Italian exchange student and now lived in Chicago. When Megan was 10 and Claire was 8, my expertise became especially valuable due to a rise in global terrorism threats. The government asked me to come on board full-time for a 2-year period, which would involve even more travel, sometimes for over a month at a stretch. Before I agreed, I sat down with Rachel and talked everything through. It was going to be a heavy lift for her, especially around the holidays. But she encouraged me to take the job. She said she and the girls would miss me, but they'd manage. That meant I missed 2 Christmases in a row, when Claire was 9 and 10, and Megan was 11 and 12. That part was brutal. Rachel and the girls spent that time visiting Julia in Chicago. I called them every day during that week. They always sounded fine, even happy. Julia's extended family was around too, including some kids close to our daughter's ages. Just before Thanksgiving, after wrapping up over 2 years working against terrorist threats, I went back to consulting full-time, with a much lighter travel load. Rachel still traveled now and then, usually once a month for a few days. It was mostly trips to Chicago. Whenever she was away, I handled everything at home. Sometimes the girls went with her. I know it's normal for daughters to bond more with their mom, and while I always had a good relationship with both Megan and Claire, they weren't as open with me. They didn't usually come to me for advice or to share personal stuff like they did with Rachel. That didn't really bother me, except for one thing. They never talked about their trips to Chicago. It wasn't like they were cold or distant, but if I asked, they'd dodge the topic or laugh it off and change the subject. Right before Claire left for an out-of-state college, she was 18, and Megan was already a junior at another out-of-state school, Rachel hit a rough patch emotionally. I found her crying a few times, and when I asked what was going on, she chalked it up to the whole empty nest thing. She suggested a quick shopping trip to Chicago with the girls, something to lift her spirits. It was kind of thrown together at the last minute, and involved a bunch of long phone calls in Italian with Julia. Since I don't speak the language, I just trusted what Rachel told me. Even though she seemed unusually emotional leading up to the trip, I didn't question it. She came back after an extra 3 days, and while her mood had improved, she still didn't seem quite like herself. What really caught me off guard, though, was how little they brought back from a supposed shopping spree. So I asked her about it. Rachel mentioned that some of the items from their Chicago trip would be shipped later, including a few things going straight to Megan and Claire's college addresses. I didn't think much of it at the time. What I did notice, though, was a definite shift in our sex life. It had never been an issue before, except during my long work trips, but this was something else. Rachel became more affectionate, more engaged. The change started not long after Claire left for college. I chalked it up to us reconnecting now that we were alone again, rediscovering each other as empty nesters. I won't lie, it felt good. Then everything changed. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I took an unplanned break from work. I hadn't told Rachel, she was at her job like usual. My original plan was to sneak in a quick 9 holes of golf, just something to decompress. But rain shut that down fast. Instead, I decided to use the free time to prep for a surprise anniversary party for Rachel. I figured she'd love it, and I even looped in an event planner to help set things up. Around 3 p.m., a delivery guy showed up with a wooden crate marked "Fragile." He used a dolly to get it up the front steps, and I signed for it. It was addressed to Rachel. Together, we placed it in the living room, careful to keep the "this side up" label in the right position. The whole thing felt odd. I couldn't imagine what was inside. The return address said, Romano Photography Studios, located in downtown Chicago. Curious, I decided to give Rachel a quick call at work to let her know it had arrived. She was quiet at first. Then she told me it was work-related and had been supposed to go directly to her office. Her plan was to have someone help her bring it in the next day. On the surface, that seemed reasonable, but something about it didn't sit right. 3 things bugged me. First, the unusually long silence on the phone, Rachel's usually chatty and upbeat. Second, the sharp, almost nervous tone in her voice when she told me not to open the crate. And third, just how tense she sounded overall. That wasn't like her. Feeling uneasy, I snapped a few photos of the crate and plugged the studio's info into my laptop. When Rachel got home later, she went straight to the living room and examined the crate like she thought someone had messed with it. I offered to help open it, partly to be helpful, partly to see how she'd react. But she flat out refused. Said she needed to take it to work to inspect it for damage and possibly file an insurance claim. The next morning, before I left for work, 2 maintenance guys from her college came by, loaded the crate into a school van under Rachel's supervision, and took off. I made a light-hearted comment about the upcoming school exhibition, hoping to get a read on her. But she avoided eye contact and fumbled her answer, said she wasn't sure if the crate was for an exhibit but would let me know. And that hesitation, the way she stammered? That wasn't the Rachel I knew. She was always so articulate. The whole situation had my radar buzzing. But what really sealed it for me, what made me absolutely certain something was off, was the silence that followed. Rachel never brought up the crate again. Not once. 2 weeks went by without a single mention. In the meantime, I did some digging. Romano Photography Studios turned out to be the American front for a world-renowned photographer named Pietro Romano. I'd maybe heard the name before, but nothing beyond that. What struck me most wasn't just his art, though it was impressive. His work blended classic techniques like bokeh blur, panning, and long exposure, often layered in the same photo. He had his own signature style, too, a visual effect named after him, Romano Abilità Artistica. From what I could gather, it made certain parts of the image hyperrealistic, while others became hazy or altered in color and tone. Hard to describe, honestly. You'd have to see it to understand it. Now here's where things took a strange turn. I discovered that the administrative director of Pietro's studio was none other than Gina Romano Bianchi, Rachel's old friend from college. I'd met Gina once, just briefly, and not in Chicago. I only knew her by her married name, Bianchi. And then came the kicker. Pietro Romano had died in a car crash on September 1st of the previous year. His memorial was held in Chicago on September 6th, before his body was flown to Italy for burial. That timing? It hit hard. Rachel had started getting emotional right around September 2nd, saying it was about the kids leaving for college. She'd planned that spontaneous shopping trip to Chicago with Megan and Claire for September 5th through the 8th. I'm no conspiracy theorist, and I'm definitely not a genius, but even I could see the pieces starting to line up. I've got a master's in chemistry from one of the top 10 schools in the country, which probably helped me connect the dots, even when it felt like the truth was about to crush me. There was only one conclusion that made sense: Rachel had been in a full-blown love affair with Pietro Romano. And not recently. This thing had likely been going on for at least a decade. And the worst part? I was almost certain our daughters, Megan and Claire, knew about it the whole time. Then I uncovered something else, another piece of the puzzle that made my stomach turn. There was an upcoming exhibition in Chicago featuring Pietro's most iconic and emotionally charged works. The show was showcasing pieces from private collectors, including some that had never been publicly displayed. The dates? April 16th through the 18th. Just 3 weeks away from when I found all this out. My birthday, for what it's worth, falls on the 18th. I had no doubt Rachel would conveniently have a work trip to Chicago during those exact days. And I was willing to bet that the photos from that mysterious crate delivered to our house 2 weeks earlier would be featured in that exhibit. I've never felt more laser-focused in my life. All that heartbreak and betrayal turned into cold, calculated resolve. I was going to handle my unfaithful wife and my deceitful daughters with precision. But I knew I had to keep my rage in check. I needed to play this smart. That same night, I booked a local hotel for 3 nights, claiming I had a sudden business trip. Before I left, I called Rachel's work line and left a voicemail that sounded as sincere and loving as I could make it, apologizing for being distant and promising to make it up to her. That was all part of the setup. Part 1 of my plan was simple: get the divorce paperwork started. I found a highly recommended attorney, Gail Schiff, and met with her right away. She suggested filing under irreconcilable differences, but said she was more than willing to use long-term infidelity if I could get some evidence. I told her I'd have what she needed by the morning of the 17th. She'd already arranged to have Rachel served by someone outside of the county sheriff's department, with a private process server documenting the whole thing on the night of the 18th, my birthday. Part 2 involved getting someone on the ground at that Chicago exhibit. After digging around, I found a young art appraiser named Robert Milano who was trying to make a name for himself. I met with him in person in Chicago and spent almost an entire day getting to know him. He knew all about Pietro's work and was confident he could score an invite to the VIP-only opening night on the 16th. I handed him a discreet, high-end HD camera and asked if he'd be willing to film certain parts of the exhibit for me. He didn't hesitate. Said he was looking for something to set him apart, and this could be it. Part 3 was all about securing the assets. I cashed in 2 bearer bonds that were tucked away in our safe deposit box. Rachel had either forgotten about them or never knew. Together, they were worth about $25,000 now. I handed that cash off to my attorney for safekeeping. I also compiled a detailed list of all our assets, every bank account, brokerage, retirement fund, and credit card. I took current photos of Rachel's jewelry and everything else in the safe deposit box, minus the bearer bonds, and passed that info on to Gail. I even had our house professionally appraised. Part 4 was the revenge portion. On the last day of my trip, while Rachel was at work, I slipped back into the house. I grabbed a marker and went through all the photo albums Rachel had carefully put together over the years. I was shocked to see how few photos I was even in, maybe 15% tops. Then I found 2 photos I'd never seen before, or had forgotten if I had. They showed Rachel, Gina, Megan, Claire, and Pietro. At first glance, they looked harmless, just friends hanging out. But in hindsight, knowing what I knew, they felt like daggers. I scanned and photocopied them in high resolution. Then, in the albums, I marked each one with a thick black arrow pointing at Pietro and wrote across them, "The love of Rachel's life." 2 days after I returned home from the hotel, Rachel casually told me she had to go to Chicago for work, from the morning of the 15th through the afternoon of the 19th. She sounded a little apologetic, mentioning how she was disappointed we wouldn't be spending my birthday together. Right then I knew. She was going to the exhibit. I casually suggested tagging along on Rachel's trip to Chicago, but she smoothly brushed it off, saying it was all work. She promised we'd do a getaway the next weekend, just the two of us, claiming she'd make it up to me. "In a way you've never experienced before." She followed that with a kiss. Honestly, by then, I viewed her more like a cheap date than a loving wife. So I played along. When I responded with a bit of sarcastic amusement, she gagged a little, clearly didn't appreciate my attitude, but tried to act like she was still on board. "That was just a taste, darling," she said with forced enthusiasm. "Just wait and see." Of all the parts of my plan, parts 1, 3, and 4 were straightforward. Once I found and hired Robert, the art appraiser, I felt confident everything would fall into place. But one part? That was risky. Really risky. Talking to Claire. The morning I dropped Rachel off at the airport, April 15th, I got in the car and drove the 180 miles from Columbus to Pittsburgh, where Claire was studying chemical engineering at Carnegie Mellon. Why her, not Megan? Because between the two of them, Claire was more like me, especially in how her mind worked. Megan was more like her mother through and through. Plus, Claire had always struggled to lie convincingly. That gave me a sliver of hope. Even though she hadn't come to me about Rachel and Pietro, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd open up if I confronted her directly. I called Claire on her cell when I was about halfway there. She actually seemed excited to hear from me, and I told her I'd take her out for a late lunch. We met at a quiet little bistro she picked, about a mile from campus, and got a private booth. After we ate, I looked her in the eye and told her I needed to talk about something very serious. Her expression instantly changed, confused, a little scared. "I need you to promise not to tell anyone what we talk about," I said. "Not your mom. Not your sister. Not until the day after my birthday." I held up my hand in the classic, I swear, pose. She looked surprised but nodded. "Wow, sounds serious," she said. "Okay, Dad. I promise. I swear." She lifted her hand and gave me a shaky smile. Then I laid it out. I told her I knew about her mother's affair with Pietro Romano, and that I was seriously considering divorce. Claire gasped and slapped her hand over her mouth. "Oh no, Daddy," she whispered, her voice cracking as tears welled up. I continued gently. "There's only one way forward. I need to know everything you know. And I need you to take a DNA test." "What?" she practically shouted, on the verge of breaking down. I quickly realized this wasn't the place for that kind of conversation. "Let's go," I said. "We'll talk in the car." I paid the bill in cash, left a $120 tip for the waitress, and found Claire outside, wiping tears from her face on the sidewalk. We got into my car and sat in silence for a minute. Then I said it straight. "Claire, our family's future depends on you being honest with me. Please, just talk to me." She cried for a while. Tried to speak, then gave up. I waited, just watching her, not pushing. Eventually, the words started coming. She told me she didn't realize Rachel and Pietro were involved, not really, until she was 12. Even though there were always signs during their Chicago trips, especially around Christmas, Claire hadn't fully understood. It was Megan who figured it out first and told her. When Claire confronted Rachel, she was told it was an adult thing. Rachel said she loved two men, Pietro and me, and that one day Claire would understand. She told Claire never to tell me, saying it would destroy the family. She said I was too insensitive to handle something so complicated. Those were her exact words. So Claire kept the secret. She broke down again when she told me that. Then she kept going. She said she hoped Pietro's death would be the end of it all. That Rachel would let go. But then, at Pietro's funeral, Rachel caused a scene, something emotional and dramatic that Claire wouldn't even fully describe. Claire said she confronted her again afterward, told her that if she ever saw Rachel with another man, if she ever tried to jump into someone else's arms, she'd come clean to me. Rachel got angry. Asked how Claire could talk to her that way. Claimed she had truly loved both Pietro and me. Swore there would never be anyone else, and that she just wanted to honor Pietro's memory. Claire believed her. She prayed I'd never find out. She really thought that with Pietro gone, her mom would finally come back to me. That there would be no more secrets, no more betrayal. But she was wrong. And now she was sitting next to me, reliving all of it, completely shattered. I let her talk for as long as she needed. Then I knew it was time to stop pressing. Any more would have just been cruel. She was already drowning in guilt and grief. Just like I had expected. After Claire had calmed down, I told her the second reason for my visit. I explained that, based on everything she had just shared with me, there might be a chance, just a chance, that I could eventually try to reconcile with her mother. But before I could even consider that, I needed one more thing for clarity, the truth about her paternity. I asked her to take a DNA test with me. Claire looked stunned. She started crying again, shaking her head. "Dad, you're my father. You're the only dad I've ever known," she insisted. "I know that," I said softly. "And I'll always be your father. But I need to know if I'm your biological father, too." She kept protesting, hurt and confused, but eventually, reluctantly, she agreed. I handed her the envelope containing the swabs and a sealed letter addressed to the lab. The instructions were simple: mail the samples, and the results would be sent directly to both of us. On the way back to campus, she watched as I dropped the envelope into an express mailbox. When we said goodbye, we hugged tightly. "Please, Dad, forgive Mom. Try to work it out," she whispered. I told her I couldn't promise that. "I don't lie, Claire." "Not like she does," I said. But I admitted she'd done her part. "If there's any chance this could be repaired, it's thanks to you." I reminded her once more. No one could know about our conversation until after the 19th. She smiled through her tears, nodded, and then paused. "There's something else," she said. "Mom and Megan are going to that exhibition in Chicago. The one with Pietro's work. Some of the pieces feature photos of Mom. It's on your birthday." She told me that Rachel had said she was sorry for the timing, but she had to go. Those pieces were ones Pietro had left to her in his will, and they'd be on display. Rachel had wanted Claire to come too, but she'd declined because of her school workload. I smiled and replied simply, "I know. Thanks for telling me the truth." We hugged again, and she walked away. She never saw the tears running down my face. My relationship with Megan? It was already dead. As dead as my marriage. I wasn't sure yet if things with Claire could be saved, but I had hope. What Claire didn't know, what I never told her, was that I had recorded our entire conversation in the car. For my records. For leverage if I needed it. But more importantly, there was one devastating secret I kept from her. The DNA swabs I sent in? They weren't mine. They came from a janitor at my office building, a kind older man with Italian roots whom I'd known for years. I told him I wanted to gift him an ancestry test for his birthday. He didn't ask why I needed 3 swabs. I promised him he'd get the full report, which he did, and he was thrilled to learn he was over 80% Italian, with traces of Eastern and Western European descent. Why did I do it? Because I wanted everyone to hurt. The lab could detect not only parental connections but also ethnic backgrounds, even when comparing 2 samples. If Rachel, Claire, and anyone else looked at the results, I wanted it to point to one horrifying conclusion, that Pietro, also Italian, was Claire's biological father. It was calculated, cruel, and deliberate. I just hoped Claire would keep her promise not to say anything. We spoke again briefly on the 16th and the 18th, my birthday, and she confirmed she hadn't told anyone. Rachel hadn't called either, so I believed her. Late on the night of the 16th, I got an email from Robert Milano. He'd attached a series of photos from the Romano exhibition, just as promised. The moment I opened the first image, I started shaking. I couldn't stop the tears. I'd thought I was ready for whatever I'd see. I wasn't. There were 10 photographs, displayed in order from smallest to largest, each one building on the last. The title of the series? Natalie Amore. Christmas Love. The first 2 photos showed 2 young girls blurred in the background. No question, it was Megan and Claire. I could tell by their hair, their clothes, which had been Christmas gifts from my mother, and their sizes. In front of them was a woman, Rachel. In the second of those 2, part of her body was exposed. And the look on her face. I can only describe it as sultry, inviting. The next 3 images showed Rachel wearing less and less. In the final photo of that set, she was fully nude. No ambiguity. Then came another series. It began with another shot where the girls were present, older now. In the remaining photos, Rachel's poses grew bolder, more explicit. The second to last image showed her in a deeply provocative position. And the final photo? It left no doubt what had just happened. Her expression said it all, utter postcoital bliss. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Afterward, I sipped ginger ale, sobbed until my eyes burned, and stared at those images again. If my heart hadn't already been shattered, I might have said those last 2 photos were artistically brilliant. But instead, they broke me. The report that came with Robert Milano's email nearly destroyed me. He wrote, "I'm sorry, I know this will be hard to hear. The collection is valued at a minimum of $300,000, probably closer to $500,000. The second-to-last photo alone could fetch between $125,000 and $175,000 if sold separately. The final 2? They're being hailed as the finest execution of Romano abilita artistica ever seen, not just by me, but by at least 4 other appraisers and critics who were discussing them at the exhibit. I'd asked Robert to find out if any of the pieces were for sale. He'd reached out to Gina, who then connected him with the person who technically owned them per Pietro's will. No shock, it was Rachel. And according to what she told Gina, they weren't for sale. Not now. They're priceless, she said. Especially the 4 where I'm completely nude. Those won't be sold until after I've passed. Then she added, I wouldn't want the public, especially my husband, seeing me like that while I'm still alive. She laughed when she said it. I sent both the audio recording of Claire's confession and Robert's photos and written report to my attorney, Gail Schiff, late that night. She called me at 7:30 the next morning, April 17th. We both agreed, the divorce petition was rock solid. Long-term infidelity, undeniable. The plan was for Rachel to be served the following evening, at the gala, during her moment of glory. I told Gail there was one more thing I needed to add. That afternoon, I dropped off a sealed envelope for her to include with the papers. It was addressed to Megan. Inside was a letter from me, a swab from the Italian janitor I'd used for Claire's DNA comparison, a new and used swab, and a prepaid express mail envelope addressed to the lab. The letter laid everything out. I told Megan that if she wanted any chance at rebuilding a relationship with me, she needed to take the swab, seal it in the provided envelope with the one I had already submitted, and send it off immediately. The lab had instructions to send the results directly to both of us, her at school and me at home. I also made it crystal clear, even if she didn't want a relationship with me, she still needed to comply. If she didn't, I'd see to it that all of our finances were locked up for years. No more tuition. No more dorm fees. No more spending money for the rest of junior year, or her senior year, at that expensive private university she was so proud of attending. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her that even if she resented me, which, based on her actions and silence, she probably did, it was in her own best interest to go through with it. Your sister has already complied. I wrote. I signed it, your father, Mark Collins. I was relieved not to be in Chicago when it all came crashing down, on my birthday. The process server sent to the gala later told Gail what he saw. Rachel and Megan were all smiles, mingling with guests, soaking up the admiration. Then, around 9 p.m., a uniformed officer approached them with envelopes. The process server stayed nearby, documenting everything with photos. They opened the envelopes right there. The officer left. The server stayed. He caught every second on camera until he was finally asked to leave. Gail forwarded me the photos later that night. Rachel, sinking, literally, until she curled into a fetal position on the floor. Megan, first shocked, then furious, then trying to comfort her mother. Her expression said it all: rage, betrayal, and confusion, all rolled into one. The next morning, April 19th, Megan called me. She didn't hold back. She was furious, disgusted with how I'd chosen to serve the divorce papers, especially in public, especially on my birthday. I didn't hold back either. I used language I'd never used with her before. Life's tough, I said coldly. Tell it to someone who cares. Then she told me she wasn't going to do the DNA test. Her tone was sarcastic, defiant. I shot back. Why not? Afraid to find out who your real father is? Or do you just not want to know that the man who's been paying your bills might not be obligated to anymore? She went quiet, then said, "You are my father." I paused. Maybe. Maybe not. But I can tell you this for sure. I added. All of your mom's and my accounts are frozen. No more college tuition. No more money. You're 20 years old now. If you want help in the future, you'll send in that test. Then I added one more requirement. And just so we're clear, I want a video. A full video. I want to see you swab your cheek, seal it in the envelope, and drop it into the mailbox. All in one take. No edits. Because you've lied to me before. And that was that. I told Megan flat out that I hadn't lied to her. She fired back that I hadn't exactly told the whole truth either, like how Claire would still have her tuition covered. That ticked me off. You know what? I said. You sound just like your mother. Cold. Condescending. I'm not wasting another second on this conversation, it disgusts me. I gave her one final ultimatum: either she did what I asked and sent the video, or this would be the last conversation we'd ever have. Period. Then I slammed the phone down. I still have a landline. That solid click, that slam, says something. Way more satisfying than jabbing a red button on a cell phone. From the 18th to the 21st, I didn't hear a word from Rachel. I figured she was licking her wounds in Chicago, probably holed up with her dear friend Gina. The fallout from the exhibit and the divorce ambush made its way into 2 Chicago papers, complete with a photo of Rachel, no doubt courtesy of the process server. Even in the middle of all that gut-wrenching pain, I had to admit, there was a dark satisfaction in it. Poetic justice, maybe? Rachel must have come back to Columbus on the 22nd. I only knew because the envelope I taped to the new steel-reinforced front door, along with the newly changed locks on the side and back doors, was gone. My attorney had left a voicemail on my cell, saying we needed to talk. That envelope had been labeled to the vile ducking slot. I figured Rachel would get the message. Inside, I'd written a short note. Contact your attorney about retrieving your personal items. The sooner we sell this house and end our farce of a marriage, the better. Don't even think about coming back inside until it's sold. Do something decent for once in your life and don't fight it. I know money is your only motivator, since love and respect were never part of the equation. Your formerly clueless ex, Mark. P.S. The doors are booby-trapped. Any unauthorized entry will trigger a fire that'll consume every family photo album you've ever made. Was the P.S. real? No. But it sounded just crazy enough to make her believe it. In hindsight, that last part may have made things harder legally. The attorneys had to get involved to sort out who could live where. If I hadn't added that P.S., I probably could have had it all go my way. In the end, we reached an agreement. We'd both vacate the house and list it for sale immediately. Temporary housing costs would be factored into the asset division. Rachel tried to play hardball during the financial negotiations, but she had no leverage. Those precious photographs from Pietro? They were acquired during our marriage. Marital assets. I demanded 5 of them. She could pick one, then I'd pick one, and so on, until all 10 were split. Her lawyer said she lost it, completely hysterical. Especially since, by then, she'd seen how I'd re-edit the family photo albums with those not-so-subtle marker additions. She insisted on a neutral appraiser. So we had 3 valuations, Robert's, one from an appraiser she hired, and a third by an agreed-upon third party. Ironically, Robert's valuation turned out to be the lowest. By refusing it, she ended up $200,000 poorer than she would have been. At one point, she even offered to give me 2 of the photos she'd picked, until she heard what I planned to do with them. Through our attorneys, I said I'd only accept them if she hand-delivered them to the local firing range and watched what I did to them. She withdrew the offer. When all was said and done, once the divorce was finalized, Rachel walked away with her personal belongings, half the furniture, and 1/4 of the home's sale. That was it. No alimony. Oh, and a suspended jail sentence. But I'll get to that later. We agreed, grudgingly, to split Claire and Megan's college costs until they graduated. But that was it. No extras. As for the DNA results? They came in. Neither Megan nor Claire was my biological daughter. Rachel went ballistic when she found out. Practically had a stroke. I called Claire. I didn't bother with Megan. She'd only done the test to keep the college funds coming and seemed totally fine with cutting me off. Claire told me Rachel claimed the DNA tests were wrong. She swears up and down that she never had sex with anyone besides you and Pietro during your entire marriage, Claire said. And she insists she didn't even meet Pietro until after we were born. I sighed. Then how do you explain 2 daughters with Italian ancestry? I asked her. When both sides of my family are 100% Dutch? Claire didn't answer. I reminded her gently that her mother had lied to me for over 24 years, about everything. About love, about loyalty, about who she really was. Still, Claire said her mom wanted another DNA test. I told both Claire and Megan that there wasn't going to be another DNA test. They were adults now. It had nothing to do with the divorce proceedings. I explained that I simply wanted the truth for my own peace of mind, and I wanted them to have that truth too. I reminded them that they'd seen me swab my cheek. They'd watched me seal the swab into the envelope and drop it in the mailbox. There was no mystery, no switch, at least as far as they knew. Claire told me their mother wanted to talk face to face. I said that wasn't happening. I'd already instructed my attorney to ignore her repeated attempts to schedule anything. And why would I want to talk to her? What good would that do me now? Claire pleaded with me, asked me not to speak so harshly about her mother. She said she still loved her, even with everything that had happened. Then she asked me, as a personal favor, if I could at least sit down with Rachel for just an hour. Just one conversation. I told Claire no. I'd forgiven her. I wanted to maintain a relationship with her. But there was absolutely nothing, that would convince me to talk to her mother again. Rachel's suspended jail sentence, and the reason she only got 1/4 of the house sale proceeds. After that phone call with Claire, where we talked about the DNA results and Rachel's desire to talk, I had a gut feeling Rachel might try something desperate. So I took precautions. I hooked up a panic button connected directly to a private security company. Carried it with me everywhere. Then one night, while I was still renting a condo during the divorce proceedings, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. Just one woman standing there. What I didn't see were the 2 large guys flanking her, standing out of view. The moment I opened the door, those 2 goons rushed in and grabbed me. But before they could fully overpower me, I managed to press the silent alarm on my panic button. They dragged me into the living room and tied me to a chair. That's when Rachel walked in. The other woman left without saying a word. Rachel apologized for the whole situation, blaming it on my refusal to speak with her or agree to another DNA test. She still claimed the results were wrong. Then she started chatting like we were old friends. Making small talk. Saying she'd always loved me. That she'd loved Pietro, too. Claimed her heart was big enough to love both of us. She said she knew it was too late for reconciliation, but she just needed to say her piece. All the while, she was holding a swab in her hand. Clear as day what her plan was: force a DNA sample from me. I didn't say a word. Not once. I refused to look at her. Acknowledging her would have been more than she deserved. As her henchmen got ready to pry my mouth open, the front door burst open. 3 armed cops stormed in, guns drawn. My panic button had worked. They found me tied up, and one of the guys had something illegal in his pocket. I explained everything, calmly and clearly. Rachel begged them to let it go, insisted nobody had meant any harm. The officers weren't buying it. All 3 of them were arrested. Let's just say the judge presiding over the divorce was not impressed. She made it very clear that if she had to rule on the division of assets herself, it would not end well for Rachel. Because of that, and the strength of my case, I walked away with the settlement I wanted: the assets, the photos, the house split, no alimony, and shared college costs for the girls. Nothing more. Criminal court didn't go easy on her either. Rachel got a 2-year suspended sentence and a $10,000 fine, which came directly out of her share of the marital assets. The 2 thugs didn't fare as well. Both had records. One got a year in prison before parole eligibility. The other, the one with the illegal substance, got 5 years before parole was even an option. And part 4 of my plan? It wasn't over yet. Not even close. I'll never admit, here or anywhere else, that I had anything to do with what happened next. Whenever someone brings it up, I just say, must have been karma. 18 months after the divorce was finalized, I was off cruising the Caribbean with a 32-year-old divorcee, Melody. She was a firecracker. Loved being spoiled, loved the finer things, and yeah, she looked way too much like a younger Rachel for my taste. Too hot, too intense, too everything for anything serious. But she was a hell of a lot of fun, even if she wore me out. While I was out there, sipping cocktails on deck, Rachel's apartment got broken into. She was at work when it happened. The place was trashed. A few things were stolen, but more than anything, it looked like someone wanted to destroy. The second most provocative, and valuable, Romano photograph of her? Gone. 7 of the other 8 remaining Romano photos? Destroyed. Every single family photo album? Ruined. When I got back from the cruise, I found out I'd become a suspect. Which, honestly, wasn't shocking. I mean, I couldn't have done it myself. I was on a ship 2,000 miles away. But that didn't stop Rachel from telling the cops I must have paid someone to do it. The moment detectives hinted that I was being looked at, I lawyered up. They combed through my phone records, bank statements, everything. Of course, they found nothing. The 2 bearer bonds I'd cashed before the divorce weren't part of the marital estate, and no transactions linked me to anyone who could have pulled something like that off. 6 months after they first contacted me, it seemed like the cops gave up. I'm sure Rachel kept pushing, but without any evidence, there was nowhere for them to go. As soon as the statute of limitations expired, I threw a party. Called it my "It's all finally over" celebration. Most of the guests were close friends. My parents had already passed, but my brother and his wife came, along with my 2 nephews. Melody was there, along with her 2 adult kids. And so were Claire, her husband, and my granddaughter. Angela wasn't there. I hadn't been invited to her wedding, and even if I had, I wouldn't have gone. Later, Claire told me Angela's marriage was falling apart. Her husband caught her cheating. They were already in the early stages of divorce. Rachel didn't take that news well. She gave Claire an ultimatum: cut all ties with me, or with her. To everyone's surprise, including mine, Claire chose me. I think it came down to 2 things. First, she finally accepted that Rachel was exactly who I had said she was, a pathological liar. But more than that, Claire realized how damaging it had been for Rachel to involve her daughters in the deception, to throw her affair in their faces, to make them accomplices in the lie. She didn't want her own children growing up around that kind of emotional manipulation. Over the past 5 years, Claire and I have had a good relationship. Only one thing ever came between us: the DNA test. Eventually, I came clean. Told her the whole truth, that I'd swapped out my own swab and submitted DNA from someone else, just to drive the knife in. She was hurt. Of course she was. But in the end, she forgave me. Just like I forgave her for staying silent all those years. Funny thing is, she was actually relieved, happy, when we finally did a real test and it confirmed that I was, in fact, her biological father. I never doubted it, not deep down, but it felt good to be sure. And even better to have her still in my life.